From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy, real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. Today is the first day of Brexit. In keeping with the theme of the show, we will discuss this and be proven wrong on everything once the show airs. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tansman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Yeah, Brexit. That's a big deal. Apparently, they really wanted it. I thought it was like a sham the whole time. And then I guess they re-voted and or not re-voted, but they picked it again through the people.
I think it was a little more nuanced than that, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a good summary.
I'm barely aware that England is different than Great Britain. I barely can do that. I don't even know what that is.
Well, one is part of the other.
What is England the little one? Is England the little spoon and Great Britain's the big spoon?
Well, no, I think you're thinking because England and Great Britain are the same thing. Right? Oh,
I think you're thinking of
UK. Yeah, United Kingdom.
Oh my God, there's 3 of them. So wait, Great Britain is England.
Yes,
like in a Batman Bruce Wayne kind of way. Like they're the same, but they're not.
Like in a
but
factual
no one knows
kind
about
of way.
But nobody knows.
Yeah.
They just live together. I love if you ever see Lego Batman. It's actually really funny. And Will Arnett is Batman. And they get all the bad characters from all of literature and they're attacking, and they have Sauron who can see through everything, and Joker's like, show me where Batman is, and he goes, he's underneath Bruce Wayne's mansion, and Joker goes, wait, Batman is Bruce Wayne's roommate? Sauron's like, yeah. So wait, United Kingdom is another thing. That's the thing that has Ireland in it.
No, Northern Ireland.
Not Ireland?
No, Ireland's it's by itself.
So Ireland, as a thing, is split in half.
It used to have Ireland in it.
Right.
Ireland
the UK, the United Kingdom, the old saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire.
Right.
The British Empire was or is the United Kingdom.
Oh.
The United Kingdom is the term for the empire.
So that used to include Canada and India and America. Okay,
there you go.
Got it. One by one, they've lost their stock.
Yeah,
that's true. But now the prince and princess are going to Canada, man. So this continent's about to get royal up.
You think it's a secret plot to get Canada back?
Yeah, that's right. They're infiltrating.
You think this whole thing?
They're just gonna win hearts and minds.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
I saw this thing where I forgot who it was, but somebody applied to take the prince's position. They applied to be a senior royal. It's this whole thing where they're submitting a resume and trying to take the job.
That's a great idea.
There's a vacancy. Yeah, that's the bit. I think that's a good bit. Well, all right. So
there's
congratulations, our English friends. We were actually talking about accents in the pre-show. Also, the police are on their way because Jacob tried to poison me, and I feel like there should be consequences for attempted murder.
He tried to poison you, or you just did what he told you to do?
I drank the thing he told me to drink. That's how people get poisoned. Otherwise, he could just stab you. You can't make a person drink.
Always the victim.
Dude, when you're drinking this Malort, you are always the victim. It is a fate worse than death. So, yeah. Anyway, England aside.
I have talked for a lot of hours.
Yeah.
To literally tens of thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
About my dislike for Malort.
And I didn't pick up on it.
Nope.
But
this is your fault.
I was clearly misled, and I wish you had videotaped it. It was so enthusiastic. You lied right to my face.
Of
You
course
said
he
it was
did.
delicious.
There was no way I was going to get you to drink it if I was videoing it.
It's like casting couch. Why are there all these cameras in here? And
the beginning of the Patreon only part of this episode, though. So if you're not on a Patreon thing, you can get on the Patreon and hear it.
You can hear the gurgling sadness.
Yeah.
As this stuff is processing.
And it's off mic, but I think you'll be able to hear it enough.
Oh, did you reach over and hit record?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, I really want to hear this episode on Patreon now. You just reached over and hit record. You didn't get to it before I took the drink, did you?
Yeah.
You really did record the whole thing? Oh, my God. Oh, it's good. Good job.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no way you can't hear that. I was screaming. The people in the studio next to us heard every word. Oh, I can't wait to go back. Very, very wise. Good move, man. Way to not waste it.
Well, I couldn't film it, so I was like, I can at least
capturing
record it.
this.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well played, man. Yeah, poisoned, though. Cops. Speaking of sad and scary things.
Sad and scary things, yeah. So this came out, I came across this in, what website was this? Science Today or something like that. Study came out.
That's what I was going to say. He said the thing I was thinking.
Horror movies manipulate brain activity to enhance excitement. So they actually
what kind of movies make you excited? What was the kind of movie?
Horror movies.
Okay. They make you excited.
Right.
Got
it. So this research was done in Finland, the University of Turku.
Oh, yeah.
What's their mascot? The fighting...
it's the fighting... isn't it like a salmon or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's a heron. Is that a herring?
The fighting herons.
Is it herring?
Herons.
Herring's a fish, isn't it?
Yes.
Sure.
Don't they eat those in jars? Aren't they like pickled herring? Isn't their thing?
Well, they don't come pickled, but you can pickle them. Yes.
You can pickle them. Yes.
You mean they're not pickled in the wild?
Right. Just
floating jars.
I don't think there's such thing as wild pickled herring.
Since this river turned to straight vinegar, it has really changed the entire ecosystem. That's awesome. It's the return of the pickled herring.
So this Finnish research team used MRIs to map the brain while people watched horror movies to kind of better understand what it is about movies that actually that we are attracted to.
Okay.
Like what actually goes on in the brain.
Right.
Yeah,
what's happening while you're watching a horror
And of course,
movie.
the reason that Nick is speaking in past tense on this is because the researchers are finished.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to go there too.
But
damn it. He's ahead of all of them. I was waiting for it. You got there first. Damn it. He's 2 for 2. 3 for 3 if you count the poisoning.
So they had a couple interesting results. Really two main ones. The first one's not anything that we don't really already know, but unseen threats are the most scary.
Okay. So anticipation fear.
Right. So
oh wow.
In the psychological. So people found horror that was psychological in nature and based on real events as the scariest.
Okay. Yeah. Right? Yeah, no, so I agree with that. Because, like, jump scare movies, those just annoy me. Like, if somebody's like, oh, let's go what? And it's just, like, the whole premise is, like, the thing's going to keep jumping at you or, like, there's monsters. I like the anticipation.
Right. And things that were unseen or implied were more exciting to see for people.
Okay.
Which fits with kind of what we know about
I agree
movies.
with that.
Like with Jaws.
Yeah,
like
right.
With
it's
the
that
very
you don't
first,
see them.
You don't really see the
Oh,
shark,
I completely agree. Signs was that way with the whole aliens. Like they're. So what is the scariest movie?
I like that one of you mentioned a good movie, and then one of you mentioned Signs.
Yeah, like Signs.
You know, Signs.
Hey, at least it wasn't a Disney movie.
Oh, that's true. You should be very grateful.
Or a Lego movie.
Yeah. I'm like Sleeping Beauty was really scary. Maleficent was really scary. What's the scariest movie you've ever seen? What's in your hallmark of worst scary movie?
And it's changed now because back when I was a theist, the scariest movie I've ever seen was The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Oh, I remember that movie.
Oh, yeah, that was scary.
And because if you're a believer...
Okay. I think it's scary on its own, man. Like, zombie movies don't require me to believe that there's zombies.
But zombie movies aren't really that scary.
They
like,
can
that's the
be?
thing. No, they've got, like, those jump moments, right? Where something will pop out. But, not like a scary movie where you're actually in it thinking, like, oh, my God, could this happen?
Okay.
Well, I mean, the whole thing with The Exorcist... Not The Exorcist with Emily Rose, but The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Remember all of the shtick with that was like all of the horrible things that were happening on set, and there were like all of these like creepy supernatural things that were happening on set while they were because they were messing with something they shouldn't be messing with.
Oh wow! So they had all this hype, building up the thing, like what's the real story of this movie?
And that was all like the urban legends around that movie were scarier than the movie.
Dude, The Exorcist did mess with me. But again, it goes back to what that study said. The Exorcist, and I realized Emily Rose is a different one, that one really messed with me because of the anticipation. Because, like, you weren't sure what was going to happen with this girl, and then they would very quick just change things. Like, she'd backwards crab walk down the stairs, like, whoa! And, like, she's, like, flying, and you're like, ah! Like, that kind of thing is really intimidating. So, for you, the theism portion of your life, that movie scared you because you were like, oh my gosh, what if this kind of thing can really happen?
Okay. Yes.
I don't think that's required for horror movie fear.
No, you actually tapped into something really interesting that this study talked about.
I like to tap a lot of studies.
I know you do. so this ties into two types of fear that people experience.
Okay.
So I'm quoting the research here. The creeping, foreboding dread that occurs when one feels that something isn't quite right.
Okay.
Right? So I think like moments like that where the person, like the girl, bends over backwards and starts doing this weird, like that's something about that. Like it's creepy because it's doing exactly that. Like it's something that isn't quite right.
Well,
like our brain has.
That's I think one of the greatest pieces of horror movies is whenever the horror movie leaves you uncertain about what the rules of that universe are, and then all of a sudden something happens. Like, and that's what the Exorcist thing is about, because like you're looking at a human, the other humans are interacting with her, she's laying in a bed like a sick person, they're all confused, and then all of a sudden supernatural things start happening, and you realize, oh my gosh, like there are no rules anymore. Like at any moment, weird things can happen, and then all of a sudden something really aggressive and weird happens that you can't explain. It's like really intimidating because you don't know where it's going to go.
Right. And the other type of fear identified is the one that we had talked about, right? The instinctive response when there's a sudden appearance.
Jump scares,
right? Of a monster or something makes us jump out of our skin. Right?
Okay. So what was your scariest movie once you were an atheist?
None. That's it. Like
nothing scares you anymore? There is no God, nothing matters.
It doesn't, like going to like like horror movies or stuff like that, it doesn't, for me, I'm only speaking my own personal experience, for me, it doesn't hit me the same way.
Right.
Because I see something and I can't relate to it as if like this could actually happen in real life.
Really?
Like for me, that's the thing that makes something scary is, and I think it's kind of that evolutionary perspective, how we developed empathy, right?
Okay.
Like we developed empathy by being able to see something and imagining what if that were me, right?
Okay.
And so when we do that with a scary movie, if it's something that is realistic, that fits with reality, then it's easier to make that jump.
Okay.
But when it's something that you know, like, okay, this could never happen, it becomes harder to create that empathy and put yourself in that situation.
So I totally would understand if you're saying like, yeah, you know, horror movie is not a big genre for me. I find it kind of trying too hard and I don't get swept up in it. But that's not to say that good cinema, good art can't create
still,
fear.
Right. No, it's still, I'll still have like those jump scares and things like that.
Yeah.
So I can still watch it and get some kind of reaction. It's just a different reaction.
Okay. It's not like that one messed with you.
Exactly. Like that one messed with me because there was, here's a really interesting story. Okay. So the whole idea, this actually happened to the best of my recollection.
Mm-hmm.
So in the movie of The Exorcism of Emily Rose, they talk about 3 a.m. being like the witching hour.
Okay. Oh,
because it's because
inverse Trinity or something
exactly,
like that.
because Christ died at 3 p.m. So 3 a.m., whatever.
Actually, he died around 3:15. It was Pacific time.
Drink.
Anyway.
No. I'm sorry.
Drink.
I'm sorry. I take it all back. We'll delete it.
Don't even know where to go with that. Okay, so anyway. So that was like the hour in which everything happened.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so this one time, and it was like probably several months after watching that movie, but I was upstairs. I had a music room upstairs, and I was playing, it was B.B. King's 3 O'Clock Blues.
Oh, wow.
I was playing that on guitar, and I have a loop station. Okay, so for our listeners who don't know what a loop station is basically you can record something, I can play something, I can record it, step on the feedback loop.
And it replays
and it will just continue to play.
How old are you in this story?
So you can... 20...
It's a month and a half ago.
27, so a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
27-ish, I don't know. I was back in Iowa.
Okay.
So I was playing that, and I had that loop, and then I was kind of soloing over top of it, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, then I turned it off for the night, went downstairs or whatever, and I think I left my amp on.
We all know exactly where the story's going, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
The looping
it
starts
came back
coming
on.
out. Yeah.
In the middle of the night,
it
it just popped back on and
like,
started
oh my
playing.
God, what is this?
I was like, oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was
no, that kind of
crazy.
stuff in real life. Okay, so I see your point, and I think I definitely receive what you're saying. Like, and I think that's somewhat true. Like, whenever you're a kid, certain movies really stick with you a lot more than when you're an adult. Like, I don't think adults who went to go see like Chucky were really walking away fearful of it. But a lot of adults were like, well, don't let your little kids see it because kids play with dolls. And like, if they see their doll across the room or whatever, like, oh my gosh, because Chucky was modeled on my buddy. And so I remember as a kid, like, I saw Chucky and it freaked me the hell out because after that, you're falling asleep at night and you think things are moving. And so it's terrifying.
I never really saw a whole lot of scary movies as a kid.
Yeah. So the scariest movie I ever saw, and it's true to this day, was The Ring. Do you remember this movie?
Yeah, I remember The Ring.
Yeah.
That movie was all anticipation. And then I'm just like swept up in it, trying to understand it. It's like a mystery. I'm trying to like understand every clue, the artistry of how they built this thing up. And then the part where the little girl climbs out of the well in the video and they're watching on the TV. And when she comes through the TV, I lost it. To this day, it is still like branded in my brain. I watched it in a movie theater. I was visiting Reno, and I was visiting friends that were at UNR. And
I would have been scared too.
It just being in Reno. I jumped out of my chair when this happened in the movie theater and landed on the dude next to me. That really happened. That is how sudden. I was in the air, like it's 6 foot vertical, like just flying. Yeah, it was bad.
And jumped into the arms of the man sitting next to you.
He became my husband. That's how I met him. And then that guy started a podcast with me, and the rest is history.
And here we are 8 years later.
But yeah, The Ring scared the hell out of me. That's right. What about you, Jacob? What's the scariest movie you've ever seen?
I saw Psycho way too young.
Okay, yeah. So it hit you, and then it was like, oh my god, people can lose it.
Well, it was more like, I don't know. I mean, I was definitely just too young to see a movie like Psycho. I probably saw it when I was like 5.
Oh, that is very young.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will do it. See, that's what I'm saying. If you see something before you're like emotionally capable of handling what it is you're seeing.
But it sounds like you saw The Ring as an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a young adult.
Let's just make that.
So go ahead and back off of that. Capable of emotionally, like old enough to be capable of emotionally handling it.
I still feel like I'm not emotionally capable of handling it.
Maybe back off of that line a little bit.
Yeah, I might come back in my 50s and try to watch it again, and maybe I'll finally be ready. But that's interesting. It's interesting to kind of understand what's happening in the brain and like that they can actually see this with an MRI. That's really cool.
So they were looking at how the brain copes with the fear response. So they had the individuals, connected to in an MRI machine.
Sure.
And during these times when anxiety is slowly increasing, regions of the brain involved in visual and auditory perception become more active.
Yeah.
As they need to attend to cues to threat and the environment.
Right.
And that becomes more important.
Right.
But then it says, after a sudden shock, brain activity is more evident in regions involved in emotional processing, threat evaluation, and decision-making, enabling a rapid response. So the two start working together. So these two regions of the brain are in continuous talkback with sensory regions throughout the movie, as if the sensory regions were preparing response networks as a scary event was becoming increasingly likely.
What's interesting about that data and the way that they're presenting that really makes me appreciate the artistry that goes into creating a horror movie, which is interesting, right? Because for me personally, I guess I'll just speak as myself, I don't think of it as very high on the hierarchy of great theater or like great cinema. Like I don't think of like the best directors are the ones who do horror movies. Like I think now they release a handful of them every Halloween and they show them up. It's a date night flick. They don't have high budgets. It's whatever. The really good movies are big dramas, that like ask you to think about deep things. But honestly, when you appreciate that it's the only version of like cinema that you have to design in such a way, anticipating the biological responses of your audience and using that. So like you're going to select sound effects and visuals and things that are building up at just the right moments that are cueing the response and then working with that response to build up to the moment you want to reveal something. That's a very interesting form of movie and production.
Brian, therapist, friend of us.
Guitar hero, smart goal setter.
Yeah, he was actually talking to me about this several years ago. He was talking about some research article that he read about how they actually did a lot of research to try to find auditory like pitches and wavelengths that kind of connect with that response in the brain, that fear response or that threat response.
Definitely cheating.
Yeah.
Because I know exactly what you're talking about, and it is definitely cheating because there are frequencies, there are sound frequencies
that you can hit
that make your lizard brain react.
Oh my god!
That will like Because, and that's kind of what this research talks about, is it's like it's exploiting the part of our brain that is constantly evaluating for threats and anticipating threats.
Right.
And so, yeah, those
cool.
frequencies that just kind of tap into that part of the brain and just activate it and get you ready.
You know what? We should see if we can get into the research portals and see if we can find if they have those files somewhere. Because this is an audio show. If we could, like, download those and, like, play them.
It is time to change our intro music.
Yeah, just fear. Just shrill fear sounds.
We are losing Patreons left and right. What is going on?
Yeah, what's happening? Everybody seems to be stepping away from this. I don't know what it is. There it is. In a world.
That is creepy, isn't it?
Right? It's interesting how we mentally sort sounds. Like, even Jacob's soundboard.
How do you have that ready? You just have that on?
That's labeled Horror 3.
Wow. Horror 3. That's hot. Is she prettier than Horror 2 and 1?
Take a drink.
Fuck. All right. We should probably do commercial.
Yeah. It's not getting any better.
It's not getting any better.
All right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss taking a break from marriage. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is David Data Scoop Violon. David is doing a NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness 5K. And so we talked about this on the last episode, but we have linked it into the show notes. There is an opportunity to sponsor his walk, raise some money for a very important charity that does hands-on work with those who are living with mental illness, their friends and family members. Let's give them the Pod Therapy bump. Check out this episode's description, smash that link, and drop some dough on David Data Scoop Violon. And if you'd like to join Data Scoop and make our show possible, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about taking a break from marriage.
All right, I really liked this one. I think it's a really interesting take on a common situation. So, really good question. Here's what this one says. Hey guys, writing in again to get your opinion on how my husband and I should handle our marital break. My previous letter was on marriage and depression. We have recently found out that he has borderline personality disorder, and I have been very patient and understanding, but the years of ups and downs have taken their toll on my mental health, and it has also started to affect our kids. His BPD has become worse lately, and we are not sure why. We've experienced a lot of loss and huge life changes since moving to Georgia, which is where he was born and raised. His intense fear of rejection has been triggered. I've become the brunt of his anger, became his therapist, caretaker, and started to lose myself while trying to take care of our 3 kids. I have anxiety and intimacy issues, and those have come back up, which has made his BPD worse. The day after Christmas, he started to show signs of another BPD fit, and we had a few fights where he told me he was done and gave me his wedding ring and became extremely irrational. The last argument we had was the straw that broke the camel's back. He was extremely hateful, and something inside of me changed. So my husband came home one day after being let go of his job. I didn't want to propose a break when he was just let go, but he said, why don't I go over the road for a while? And I knew he didn't mean it before, but I agreed with him now, and so I said I was thinking the same thing. He was mad, then sad, then understanding, then sad again over the next week and a half, but now he is more on board than he was in the beginning. He says he sees what he has done and realizes the changes that need to be made and promises to be there for me and that he is a different person now. I believe he feels that way, and I do see the changes, but it's only been 2 weeks. Trying not to discount his self-awareness, I remind him that it took 30 years to get to this point. 30 years of dysfunctional coping skills and negative behaviors, etc. It's going to take years to heal and retain new healthy coping skills and become more emotionally stable. I'm not asking for years, but I am asking for at least 6 months apart so he can work on his issues and I can work on mine. I can't start to heal and focus on myself while he is here because he has become codependent on me, and even though he is doing well now to give me space and trying not to rely on me solely for emotional support, I know it's going to be hard for him when I'm not as emotionally available as I have been because I've enabled this unhealthy habit for too long. And even though he has been so kind and helpful, when I see a little bit of his BPD come up, I can't help but become anxious and alert. I can't think, I don't eat, I have a hard time caring for the kids at times. At this moment, I do feel I want to work this out, so here's what I've come up with. He goes on the road for work a lot and comes home every 1 to 3 weeks for a few days at a time. We carry on like we're still together because I feel like we are, and it's the best thing for the kids. I'd originally said no sex because of my own emotional issues around it and thought it would be best for us not to have that because it could make it harder on one or both of us. He obviously doesn't agree with this and is still trying to understand why we have to do this whole living apart thing. He understands intellectually but not emotionally. This is my last-ditch effort to fix us. We have done counseling and everything, but I think he needs to do a lot of work on his own, and so do I, for us to be healthy together. He has started online therapy and seems to be more serious about it than I have ever seen him be. I feel pressure to change my mind, but I feel like it would be the end if I change my mind. Any advice is so much appreciated. We would go back to our marriage counselor, but we lost our insurance when he lost his job. Thanks, guys. Anonymous.
Well, that sucks about the insurance. I hear that a lot, unfortunately.
That is rough.
So let's start with some good things first. Number one, Ryder, I have to commend you on your insight. There's a lot of stuff in here that she's picking up on about herself, like a lot of self-awareness things that I think is really good. Number one, being able to recognize the codependence piece, and then being able to recognize things that happen internally when you have contact. So I'm hearing you say that, you know, when he is around and when something happens and his symptoms start to flare up, you notice in yourself anxiety building, and you notice this tendency to go back to your old pattern of behavior that is in response to his symptoms and his pattern of behavior. And having that awareness already is very important, because that's usually something that people have to kind of develop over time, is kind of becoming self-aware of, when he does this, this is how my body reacts. This is what my brain does. This is how my anxiety gets triggered. And because once you have that awareness, then now you can start to intervene in that. You can develop some coping skills to interrupt that pattern. So that's the first thing I want to say, is I think that's, good job on you for being able to recognize that. Yeah.
And this is the thing. A lot of relationships, when they reach this place where they have tried multiple things, they get discouraged, they don't feel like they have a solution, this conversation comes up. And I know Nick and I have heard this a million times. Every therapist has heard this. And they'll say, we're thinking about taking a break. And that's a ubiquitous word. I think it's an ambiguous word. I don't think we know what it is. But people bring it up. And for some folks, it's, we're going to live in different places. They're going to go live at their brother's house for a little while. We're going to, in this case, the husband works in a job that makes him not be part of the family life most of the time. And I've seen the same thing in like military families where like husband or wife is deployed quite often. And so what does it even mean that we're not together? Isn't that dangerous? Because isn't it like sapping the little bit of time that we could be, kind of reconnecting? And so it's a good question, right, Nick? Like this question of, should you use a break to heal the marriage? Is important because on one hand, I think that it empirically makes some sense, right? That, okay, we're not getting along. We're causing harm to each other. Maybe space causes contemplation. Maybe space uncomplicates our interactions so that we can focus on our own stuff. Maybe space allows us to see our own stuff and not be distracted by our community stuff and our relationship stuff. But at the same time, you're also taking away valuable quality time. There's no exchange of love languages. There's no more connection. And so there's a risk to this, right? Because if you're taking a break, you could be creating kind of the new space and the new normal that actually prevents returning to the relationship. So what are your thoughts on that? Like using a break is a helpful thing.
I think it can be helpful, but and here's, I have a lot of questions in this area too, because marriage and relationships and couples work isn't really my specialty, but I guess that's kind of where some of my questions come up too, is like, so when you actually separate and you take a break, what are the circumstances or what are the things that you expect to see that tell you, okay, now it's time to get back together?
Yes.
Because I think sometimes what happens is people they'll separate without having a clear idea of what will bring us back together. And therefore what usually brings them back together is just loneliness. Like, well, I miss you. I miss you too. All right, let's get back together. And so we didn't really work on anything. We just separated until we missed each other enough, and then we kind of came back.
Right.
And maybe that's healthy. Maybe that's okay. But I guess if we're looking at making bigger changes, I think this is kind of where maybe a family therapist or a couples counselor would intervene and actually like, okay, let's identify some specific signs that we want to see that would tell us we're ready to kind of get back together.
No, I think that. I think that you should always begin something with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And if you know what's not working, sometimes we leave it very vague and we say, well, I don't want to get back together until you've done some personal work or until I'm feeling differently in the relationship. But as the writer notices, that can change overnight. Mm-hmm. That can change in 2 weeks. And the writer's saying, part of me thinks maybe we should just arbitrarily say 6 months. That way we can look back at this and say, we entered into a time of reconstruction. We set some goalposts of what that reconstruction time would look like, 6 months. And then, we can reevaluate. I actually am a fan of that. I like the idea of some kind of time stamp that teaches us that we know when we're going to reevaluate. I
agree. I mean, do you think there's 2 weeks? Do you think you're going to get... Do you think any meaningful work is going to happen in 2 weeks?
Honestly, here's my view of this. So, do I think that breaks are fundamentally a good thing for relationships? Case by case basis, honestly.
Right.
I believe that whenever you're using the concept of a break in a relationship, and this is an imperfect metaphor and might cause some people to cringe, but it's similar to me to chemo. It's one of those moments where you have to ask, is the medicine harsher than the thing that we are trying to kill, right? So, there's a problem in our relationship, and we're reaching for a tool that is inherently non-nourishing, inherently looks like not being in a relationship, right. Inherently could risk the relationship. Do we believe that that's what we have to do? And there's times when couples reach that place because we're going to end up broken up. So the last exit on the highway before breakup town is, take a break. And so, let's start there. So I on a case-by-case basis, I think that can be a useful tool. I think it should be done in a supervised way where there's some kind of therapist who's saying, hey, listen, express to me what it is you're looking to change. How are you going to engage during this time to try to create those changes? What are you going to do personally? Well, I'm reading this book and doing this workbook. Okay, I'm seeing this online therapist. I'm going to take that seriously. We are still going to see each other. Here's how we're going to co-parent the children. Here's how we're going to still exchange information and still express love to each other. Because I don't want you to just go to Alaska and completely evacuate the family. I think that's dangerous too. So I think it's a very delicate situation. But the question of how long you ought to be, my first take on it is and I've actually thought about this as a business idea. I've thought about creating a relationship rehab where it's there's just a group home where people that are in the doghouse that are they've gotten in a fight or something bad's happened. A lot of times they do feel like they need to split for a while or they need to get away from each other to not be in proximity. That would be a smart thing to have is a place where they could go. And it's hey, therapists run this place. It's like rehab. You're just here to stay, but we're going to work on this.
There are prostitutes.
There's prostitutes. I was gonna co-locate it with a brothel.
I was going to say I'm on board with this business idea, but it probably shouldn't be co-ed.
Yeah, no.
Could you imagine?
I was thinking about a men's group. Usually the woman gets the house. Usually the woman gets to stay, and the dude packs his bag and he gets out and goes and crashes on a guy's couch or whatever.
I don't see any reason this shouldn't be co-ed.
I guess it depends on what your goal is.
Yeah. Welcome to Jim's Bed, Breakfast, and Brothel. We do therapy physically. No, but when I think about it from that lens, I think 30 days. I think, a 30-day cool-off is intelligent.
Okay.
That's a pretty robust amount of time.
Next question. What do you think the separation should look like? Because I've seen this with couples before, too, where they can take the separation and they'll say, okay, for 30 days, I'm not going to see you. Maybe we'll touch base if we have to communicate about kid stuff or, about certain things that are happening, but we're going to be separate. And then there's other folks who will say, okay, we're taking a break. We're going to separate for a little while, but then they still spend every night together. Somebody goes home to another place to sleep.
Right.
So I mean, what's the healthy distance?
And again, this comes back to why I think it's so case by case and why I kind of want it supervised, because I want somebody who's evaluating all the factors. How are the kids? How do they respond? How old are they? What are your commitments together? What are your financial abilities? Is there potential for violence? If there's a potential for violence, and the writer kind of alluded to, there's been some pretty explosive fights, and if there's a potential for violence, I'm much more likely to say I like the quarantine model, or I want it to be you guys live in two different places. You do not go to the same house to see each other. You go on dates to public places.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of retraining both of you to be safe.
Because in my mind, and again, I'm kind of speaking on my ass here because I don't do couples
That's
work.
entirely the brand of our show.
Exactly.
That's what we do.
So I just figured at episode 109 we should finally announce it.
Yeah. A lot of people figured it out.
Yeah, I guess because I see this sometimes and I'm thinking like, well, it's not different enough. To me, it feels like it needs to be different enough than your normal interactions to kind of create some stress. Like it's got to be enough that's going to be something that can like trigger your brain into realizing, okay, we're doing something different.
Yes.
We're working on something different.
Oh, I agree with that.
Because if it feels like the status quo,
nothing's really changed.
Nothing's changing.
Yeah, we spend every day together. We pick up the kids together. We have breakfast together. Everything's normal. I come home, have dinner with her, and then right after the kids are in bed, the last hours that we would both be awake, I say goodnight and I drive across the street and go to a hotel. That is not enough change, right? You're symbolically not sleeping in the same building. It's not meaningful. And so I agree with you. This is why I think that it's a plan that needs to be structured by somebody who's trying to coach you through it. You know, does that make sense? I think a couple can do it, but I think they have to think it through. So I agree with you. I do think that it's got to be that balance of enough of a change that we are not going back to normal. We're disrupting our routine. We're disrupting our thought patterns. We're not capable of slipping into what has been going wrong. So that needs to change. And at the same time, though, I want to be careful not to take it so far where we're disrupting the ecosystem. Because I look at a relationship as a living thing. And that's typically an MFT perspective, is we look at the system, right? Mm-hmm. And so system psychology, it warns us against killing the system. It warns us the same thing, like, oh, this patient, their leg is hurting. Okay, amputate the leg. Well, wait a minute, open the leg, risk the leg to heal the leg, but be very careful not to amputate it to save it. Unless you feel like you have to. And then sometimes you do have to guide them toward divorce. Which is a thing too.
And obviously the added component of the children, you have to factor that in as well.
Yes.
Because that's going to change the whole system.
The thing that the writer said that I really love, though, is I don't think the writer is so naive as to believe that taking a break is itself a healing act. Not at this stage. There are times in a new relationship you got a little hot on the collar. Let's take some time. Let's see each other in a week. Like maybe we're get a little too close right now. Okay, yeah, sure. Then the healing act is just the distance itself. But oftentimes in these kinds of situations where it's been years in the making and we have dysfunctional patterns and dysfunctional thinking and we treat each other poorly and there's a lot of subtlety to this, the break itself is not the healing action. The break itself is a context for healing action to now take place. And that's him meeting with a therapist and you doing some thinking carefully about your own stuff or meeting with a therapist if you can, interjecting some books and some careful thought. Writer, in the letter too, I think you were careful not to take it so far as to blame everything on BPD, borderline personality disorder. You're a regular listener to the show. You've written to us before, so you know my view on that. I'm really careful about weaponizing narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder. I think it ends a conversation more than it opens one. I'm good with that being something we're talking about too, in the same way that you said I have anxiety and emotional issues, and that's influencing this. What do you think, Nick, about the view expressed toward the end of the letter of, I've said we probably shouldn't be having sex at this time? But the writer said, and if I'm being honest with you guys, it's because I have issues with this. This is me allowing my issues to decide what we're going to do. My husband thinks that's a terrible idea. I think that works better for me right now. What are your thoughts on that? I
mean, from the information that I have, I think that's probably a healthy thing. I mean, because if it feels unnatural or if it feels like it's going to cause more problems to her, and if she's not on board with that, then I think taking a break from that is a good thing. I think that is a disruption, right, to the system. So maybe, but I don't think a disruption enough where it's going to, like you say, cut off the leg. I think it's enough to actually kind of disrupt the system so that we actually have to analyze this and look for, and kind of assess the situation, what's going on. Okay. I think I guess I'm not, I don't think that's a bad thing. Do you? I mean, do you feel like it's kind of risky? Okay.
Yeah, I am. I'm on the other side of it. I have couples that ask me that all the time. And they're like, hey, while we're going through this process and trying to figure this out, we've, one member of the couple will sometimes say, I'd really like there to be a no sex agreement, but they're often asking me, like, what do you think about that? And I usually don't love it. I usually tell them my view, my theory of the case of how humans do systems and how relationships form involves the exchange of love data to each other. And sex, to me, is a form of communication. It's a form of affirmation and communication. And sometimes when couples are really bad at communicating verbally and emotionally, they still have the ability to communicate physically. And just that touch, that warmth, that connection is an I love you statement.
Okay.
So I'd usually tell them, can we step back from creating an embargo? I don't want to make this illegal, right? Just like with alcohol. I don't want alcohol to be forbidden, but I want us to say, hey, I'm not really warm to this idea right now. So let's not take sex off the table, but let's communicate to our partner, I'm not feeling very safe to be sexually vulnerable with you right now. I'm telling you that. So if you would like to have sex, just understand you're going to have to approach me a little differently and play the long game here because I'm not really there right now.
So to clarify,
that's good communication.
Yeah. So to clarify, don't outlaw it, but it still has to be natural. It can't be something like, if you don't feel comfortable with it, well, you got to do it because our marriage is on the line.
Right.
It's not, you're not pushing anybody into that obligation. You should do this for anything.
No.
It's more just like, if it happens naturally, okay, fine, great.
Yes.
If you don't want to do that, okay, then that's fine.
Exactly.
But we're not going to outlaw it.
Yeah, I just don't think that that's ever helpful because, I believe sex is medicinal. I think it's one of the tools we're going to use to repair this relationship. I think it's a form of communication. I think it's a legitimate one of the love languages, which I consider a very useful theory. And to me, that'd be as stupid as saying, hey, during this time, I am not going to affirm you. Why? Because I just don't want to become dysfunctional. It's
okay,
why would you do that? That's absolutely part of how we're going to repair. Hey, during this time, during our breakup, I just feel like we should in no way, shape, or form spend quality time together. Okay. Just seems like let's not take good ideas off the table. Express to me that you don't feel comfortable right now. Fine, that's good communication. We need to do more of that anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's just being honest about it. But yeah, I don't usually want things removed from the table.
That makes sense.
Especially if the person writing the letter can say, hey, this mostly has to do with me and my personal baggage. And so this is me feeling more safe because I have issues with this. Then my offer is express your reluctance to this, express to your partner. And let's also do the work on that, right? Because you wouldn't accept your partner saying, listen, my angry outbursts are part of my BPD, and so I need you to accept the presence of my vitriolic anger in our relationship. If we wouldn't accept their dysfunctional activity that is not helpful for our relationship, but is entirely dependent on their own mental illness, we shouldn't accept us doing that too and harming the relationship because it makes us feel like it's more congruent with our mental illness or what we're going through. Both are not the best thing we could bring to the relationship.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to be forced to have sex either. That's not okay.
Right.
I just want you to feel like, don't take it off the table. Let's include this topic in what we're working on. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's how I usually interject it. But great question, Ryder.
Yeah, that was a really good question.
Really great question. I think everybody's faced this.
Yeah, definitely. So
good luck to you.
Yeah, keep us posted.
Please keep us posted. You've done a really good job of writing to us multiple times. So please continue to and keep us updated and see a therapist for yourself too.
I want to know what the goal of a break is.
Right. If the goal of a break is to get back together, you've got to use this very carefully, because you could just be auditioning what breakup looks like. And it could be weird.
That's a good point.
I always, and the writer, I don't know the writer, but when I see people taking breaks.
It says SJ?
Yeah.
When
I know people who take breaks, sometimes it feels like they are making a last-ditch effort to save a relationship. Sometimes it feels like they are making an effort to reestablish how they have relationships, in the hope that will also help their particular relationship, And there's a lot of nuance there.
Yes,
and I'm always kind of unclear. I'm not a big fan of breaks anyway.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think it can be strategically useful, but I think too often it's just like this bomb that we're just going to light, and it's like, hold on. We have to be really careful with how this works. It could be useful to break up the logjam if carefully applied, and we're using it with a purpose, but you have to know what you want out of it before you start doing it. I think that's really important because too often taking a break is just, I'm so angry at you. I don't want to break up with you because I don't want you back on the market, and I'm not prepared to take that last step, but I don't want to be with you. And sometimes we're just literally auditioning what being single would look like.
Yeah, kind of dipping your toe in.
Yeah,
to
you're
see.
walking into the pool from the stairs.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what it is. And like as a therapist, I'm going to ask those questions to get to the bottom of this because sometimes that's what you reveal. Because the person's like, well, I don't know that I want to be with them anymore. But
the Know Nothing life coach wants to know the goal of the break. I
think it's a really good question. And also, remember, if you don't have insurance, not a big deal. Jacob doesn't take insurance anyway.
That's right.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm your life coach, Jacob. You have just been life coached.
Market price.
He will be calling you.
Yeah, he'll call you. Market price. That would be a great thing to add to his business card.
What?
Or on the Make-Believe website that we definitely didn't build.
On market price.
Market price, yeah. Fees, market price.
It's like the lobster.
Lobster.
Market price.
Catch of the day. How much is time with Jacob? It's market price.
If you're asking,
you can't
probably too much.
Probably too much.
Is life coaching in season now?
That's right. It depends on how much time he's got. There's a premium model of exactly when his hours are available. Good luck, Ryder. Good luck. And keep us in the loop, man. I wish you well on this one.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will discuss suicide because of marriage. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's THERAPRODUCER sponsor is Judy Schneider. Judy wants to give a shout-out to her dear friend, Dr. Hariyardi Shoshima Abdul-Majid, and her amazing team members at Mercy Malaysia. Mercy Malaysia offers early counseling and psychosocial support for persons affected by disasters. It gives the victims a safe space to express their feelings and thoughts. Sharima is currently caring for her father, who's suffering from Alzheimer's, while still organizing for and planning for Mercy Malaysia when time allows. Judy wants the world to know how proud she is of Sharima and her astounding work ethic, and just wants to say that she loves her, misses her warm hugs, and thinks about her wonderful father every day. If you'd like to join Judy Schneider and make our show possible, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about suicide because of marriage.
All right, this is a good one here. Hello, Pod Therapists. I do not know what I'm expecting from you in return of this email. Perhaps you are the only ones that I think will not judge me. I feel connected to you after listening to your podcasts. I admire what you guys do, and you've given me courage on so many occasions. I'm mostly optimistic in life, kind, and from India originally, which is very important to my story. I'm married, employed, and did not have a pretty childhood growing up. I got married 3 years ago, but never lived with my husband as he was still studying and I started working. It was a love marriage, which means I chose him rather than my parents choosing him. I knew my husband about 18 months before the wedding, but in the time between my engagement and wedding, I realized that I did not really love him. But I went ahead with the wedding anyway because I was afraid to back off and hurt everyone. This is a huge thing in Indian culture. If children want to cancel the wedding, parents will usually say that children have humiliated them enough to commit suicide. So this is the norm, but I blame myself every day for not having the courage to break up. I was living a happy, activity-filled life when I started working. After 2 years of living by myself, I met someone. And I assume this means during the marriage. It was just friendship initially as I was struggling with panic attacks and met someone who was going through the same thing. He worked in my office, but was on a different team. We became attracted to one another and eventually feelings developed. We both tried so many things to stop it from going further, but we spiraled toward each other and I fell in love. The normal thing to do is go ahead and tell my husband and divorce him, but I'm afraid that he will not handle the separation well and that my parents will hate me and even disown me. I have a lot of relatives who love and respect me. I'm afraid of losing all that. In this situation where I cannot stay married or divorce him, I feel ending my life is an easier option. The worst part is I'm afraid of hurting my parents and sister by doing so and afraid about my suicide attempt failing. I lost my aunt, who was my best friend and shared a room with me when I was 12 when she committed suicide. So I know how much it hurts the people around. Here I am in this turmoil, not taking any action. For various reasons, I do not have a single confidant to share all this with. The man I love has decided he has to move on, and I let him as I should not hurt him further. But I still love him, and probably will for a really long time. Thanks for reading my story. Anonymous.
So before we read this, we should let everybody know that we have actually already replied to this. Whenever we get an email or something to this effect that's serious, when we're talking about suicide, we always jump on that as quickly as we notice the email. So we did get permission to read this on air, so we're going to do that for everybody else, but we have already responded to it.
Yeah, and so to put it in perspective for anybody that relates to this, and I'll reiterate what we did reply to the anonymous writer and gave them, is that the first thing we told them is suicide is not a solution, period, and full stop. Suicide is never a solution. If you are ever thinking that death will solve the problem or death would be an escape from the problem, that sentence right there is evidence that you are inside of a delusion. A delusion is a false interpretation of reality. Don't trust that thought. So we did let the writer know suicide is not a solution. We talked about resources and getting help immediately for what this writer was facing. Now let's dive into some of the complexities of this. So in the situation, and this was something also that we told the writer, was not only do we think you should get a therapist immediately, and we gave the writer advice as to how to get a therapist using the resources that were attached to the writer's career and things, but we also advised, if you can, try to get a therapist who understands your culture in a really intimate way, because clearly that is a huge factor here. And this is why culturally competent counseling is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we all, it's part of our CEUs, our continuing education units that we all have to do. We all have a lot of training in cultural sensitivity and how to, acknowledge that, be aware of it. But in the end of the day, like, there's only so much training you can really do. If you got somebody who's really familiar with that culture, that would be perfect.
It really helps, because then there's a lot of unspoken dynamics that the other person can understand. Now, we also told the writer, but don't let that be an excuse to not get help.
Exactly.
Right? Period. At the end of the day, you go with, and we said this in the email, go first available therapist. If down the road you find a culturally in sync one, great.
Yes.
First
it's always
available
easier
therapist.
to switch over.
Yeah, especially when
try to find the perfect one.
Don't wait. Yeah, get started immediately. You're in crisis. This is the kind of thing, especially when the writer talks about, there is nobody else I can talk to. I'm writing into your show. Okay, clearly we have to change this immediately. Yeah. We cannot just live in this little closet of secrecy. So, and the writer did respond and thanked us for that, and definitely committed to doing that. And so that was very important for us to get that feedback. And the writer began planning for safety, and so that was immediately important. So this other question of whenever you are in a relationship, and I think this is important because sometimes people ask this question of us. They'll say, "Am I depressed, or am I in a bad relationship?" Like, because that's important. And I think our first blush is usually to say, I don't want the keys to your happiness to be in somebody else's pocket. But neither of us is naive enough to say relationships don't matter. Clearly, humans desire them. It's evolutionarily built into us. It's how we esteem ourselves. Love as a concept is something people aspire for. And when you feel like you're trapped in a relationship, whether that's because of kids or legal reasons or cultural reasons, and you can't do anything, that in and of itself is a really tough situation. And then whenever you actually have feelings for somebody else and you can't explore those or feel free to pursue those, that's double trouble, right? And so, like, all of that at once is a really tough recipe.
And then we're still not done yet, because then what we have to do is then we have to add on top of that the stress of, well, what is so-and-so going to think of me if I do this, or if I end this relationship, or if I seek out this other person, or because of my culture, I'm going against my culture. And then you start throwing that on there too. It's a lot to process.
It is. And that's, I think, really important, because when we're reading back to you, here's the way we're seeing the magnitude of these problems. I think that's us respecting you. I think that's us respecting that we can't just say, well, you just need to, be strong and file for divorce. No problem. No. And this is something that rookie therapists do all the time, that I know that I remember getting in a really big conflict with a couple of therapists at one point, because it was a similar situation where a woman was in a very bad marriage. The husband in the situation was doing a lot of infidelities, and like it was all out in the open, and the wife alone came to see the therapist for support. And it was a rookie therapist, it was an intern, and the therapist was like, well, you should divorce him, like clearly you should end this marriage and walk away, like it's not healthy for you, you're not happy, it's not good, he's cheating on you, blah 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 blah. And the patient said, I'm actually a very devout Catholic, and so it's that's not really an option for me. Like, I personally, religiously feel strongly that's not okay. And also my people and my culture, my family, this is not going to work. And the therapist took the road of leaning against that and saying, you should get a divorce. Religion is not going to make you healthy in this case.
Let me guess what happened.
We had words.
No,
Yeah.
I was just going to guess that the patient just stopped showing up.
Yep. Patient stopped coming.
Because why would you?
Yeah.
If
Of course they do.
Yeah.
If you're going to therapy and the therapist is just constantly telling you what you should do that you know is not going to be an option for you, why would you continue to go?
Beyond
Not being
that,
hurt.
after you tell the therapist, I cannot do this, here are the reasons that I'm not going to do this, and the therapist keeps insisting that that's what you need to do, like, yeah, fuck you.
I don't think we can do this anymore. You're not being helpful. You're just
not
chiding
listening.
me.
You're not listening to me.
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over again, especially with religion, or culture. I've had the same thing where I had an Islamic patient who was Muslim, and they were gay, and it was the same thing of like, so help me work through this. And of course, one part
then
of you
your
wants
response was, "Well, God's not real.
God's not real. Don't worry about it. It's all a lie."
Right?
Yeah. So, but the question becomes like, oh, well, should you tell your family? Should you be authentic? Should you hide this? I don't want to hide this, but I'm struggling. Meet them where they're at.
Or anytime we're getting a little off topic here, but I'll say this: anytime the therapist says you should do this,
that's
with
already...
the exception of contacting a suicide hotline,
yeah, then listen.
That's the spot where a good therapist is like, okay, no, we need to do this. This is happening,
right. That's when.
But otherwise, I think a good therapist is going to be like, all right, well, let's figure out where you're at,
right,
and let's together figure out something that's going to work for you.
That's what it should be. And so, quick PSA on this. When we don't talk about it a lot on the show. One of the people in the real world who actually listens to our show was talking to me the other day, and they said, do most of the people that listen to your show, are they like, therapists in training, like people in school or professionals? And I was like, no. I was like, no, our colleagues, there's a couple, like a couple of our colleagues can stand us, but no, mostly it's just people living their lives. And, they don't mind that we talk meta sometimes about the profession or, why cultural counseling is super important. And so anyway, in the writer's case, you cannot understate the importance of the culture. And I say all that, writer, and the reason I talked about the Catholic scenario and the Islamic scenario was because I want to equate the fact that it's not appropriate for us to say, you know what you need to do, girl? You need to divorce this guy. You clearly don't care about him. You follow your heart. Your coworker. I want to validate that that's how you feel, and I imagine you fantasize about that all the time. And yet I also want to honor the complexity of this, and I do not want to minimize it to you. That's not fair. That's not fair. Your family matters to you. Something internal matters to you. Being accepted by your people matters to you. Your parents' approval matters to you. It is part of your value system. And if this is incongruent, if this will cause you harm, I'm not going to speak as if that's not true, right? So then it becomes a question of how do we do what we can do in the now and then also plan for the future, right? In the now, and we said this to you in our written reply, in the now, we're feeling suicidal. That is the highest, biggest, most important priority right now. We can't make good decisions if that's where our head is at. That means depression. If somebody said, do you think I'm depressed? Are you suicidal? I am. Yes. You have met 100% of the criteria instantaneously. You have a mental illness right now that is called a major depressive episode. It requires intervention. A therapist, it can require medicine. That is going to be the first thing we deal with. And so, writer, one of the first things I'll tell you is I never want anybody to make drastic choices in their life when they're feeling depressed. That includes ending their life.
Well, and I've said this before in treatment too, where we've had, when we were working in the rehab, a lot of people who wanted to leave, and abscond from treatment.
Right.
And it's usually when they're angry, upset, frustrated, depressed or something. And I always tell them, like, look, we've got two different parts of the brain working against each other right now. Right now, the emotional part is in charge and is driving. And the emotional part is not good at making really good long-term decisions.
Right.
So maybe we need to deal with the emotion first.
Yes.
Let's process the emotion, get that down, and let the logical part of the brain come in and make decisions. I don't like making any big decision if I'm hungry, if I'm angry, if I'm depressed, anything like that. That's not the time to make a decision.
Yes.
Deal with the emotion first, and then we'll come back. And once I'm in a clear head, then I can make a better decision.
And writer, when your heart is broken right now because the man you do love has expressed to you that he's going to step back and you're letting that go, this is the worst possible time for us to trust your judgment about the future. Because right now, if I asked you, what does the future look like? Your answers are going to sound like hopeless. Nothing will ever change. I am forever doomed to be married to the man I don't care for and to not be with the man I do. Okay, full stop. Let's slow that down.
Well, and you can see with that line of thought how suicide jumps in.
Exactly.
Because it all...
And you can't trust the perspective. That goes back to that word delusion. When we are inside of a delusion, I don't want you to trust what you think you see. And this is where a therapist is going to partner with you to slowly start to unravel your options and figure this out. Are there areas that we don't have control over? Yes. We do not have control over the culture. Are there areas that there's things that we think are true, but we don't have 100% of the knowledge? Yes. We don't have 100% of the data of how your parents are going to feel about every possible scenario. We have probably pretty educated guesses. I'm not going to say you're wrong about what you think their responses are going to be, but I am going to say that there might be scenarios that we haven't thought about yet that could be an arrangement of some kind where the relationship is negotiated, or perhaps there's some other options. We don't know yet. Right now, everything seems bad. And when you're wearing sunglasses, the world seems dark.
Right.
That is not accurate yet. And that's why I want to get into the finely nuanced details of what is accurate for the future, but we have to address the depression first.
And I want to jump in here too real quick, because when you're talking about like the delusion, really we're kind of talking about the emotion
Yes.
influencing the brain. And one thing I really want to stress here is that doesn't mean something's wrong.
No.
That means you're a human.
Yes.
We all do this.
Yes.
This is just kind of the way it's our human nature. It's the way our brains work.
It is. And so, and thank you that you were responsive to us when we told you that. Now, when it comes to the relationship, and again, because we're so focused right now on the really important first thing, depression and suicidality, I believe firmly, writer, that if we can start to address those first, if we can get you to a place where you're grieving the loss of this other relationship, because I think that's a factor in this too. You're depressed, yes. You're suicidal, yes. You are also grieving a legitimate thing. Like I fell in love with a coworker. We had a shared kindred spirit. He's given up because he feels like this is not going to work and that we're only hurting each other. So we're no longer going to be together. I'm feeling more lonely than ever. Okay, yes. And I want you to have permission to grieve that. And I want all these present conditions to change before we start thinking about everything that we could finally change in the relationship to get to the future. Okay? There's a lot of ways forward. But one thing I want to make sure we're talking about, I see this as an interesting letter, Nick. I see it firstly as a suicide thought. Mm-hmm. I see it firstly as depression. I see that as the presenting problem. And then I see the conditions as being complicated and relational in nature. Fair, right? But as a therapist, the top line diagnosis is, I'm not diagnosing, but top line presenting problem is, hey, first we got to deal with this depression. First we got to deal with this suicidality. But to the greater audience, to everybody who hears my voice right now, one of the things I need you to understand is that whenever we feel stuck in life, whenever we feel stuck, that we no longer have control over our own destiny, where we are trapped in a job or trapped in a relationship or trapped in a truth or trapped in a life, whenever we feel depressed and discouraged, we become hopeless and we lose optimism and we no longer see a future that feels like we have any control over it, we start to feel this same way the writer does. Death seems like an answer. It seems like a door we could walk through to opt out of all this. That isn't true. Suicide is not a solution. Death does not solve problems. Death creates problems. Death is not resolution. You are not free when you die. You suffer, and then the lights turn off. And then everybody that you ever cared for suffers indefinitely. And if you're not the kind of person who loves putting other people through pain, and if you're not the kind of person who wants more pain in your life, death is never the answer. Now, having said that, change is inevitable. Hear me. Change will happen. And the delusion of this is whenever you believe that you are stuck and this is the static universe and nothing's ever going to change in your life, this is your destiny forever and ever, amen. And because you feel like that pattern is inevitable and it's going to happen, you feel stuck and then you feel like death needs to happen. Stop. Change is inevitable. Change is happening in every corner of the universe at all moments, at all times. Change is happening always. And it is happening in your life in small and subtle ways. It is happening in you in small and subtle ways. Time is chipping away at all aspects of your reality. Right now, the world seems a certain way and may have been that way for a long time. But that doesn't mean that change is impossible. In fact, change is inevitable. And all we have to do is tap into the way to accelerate that change, and anything that you're facing can be dealt with, can be overcome. No reality is unchangeable. Hold on to that.
And I think when we get into that situation where we just get really stressed and we're kind of pushed to our limits, our brain naturally kicks into worst case scenario mode.
Yes.
And we start imagining, it's not like we imagine, it's like almost like we know. Mm-hmm. Like, I know this is going to be the outcome. This is what's going to happen. And I think back just personally, some self-disclosure here. I think of all sorts of different times that I've had this, that I've gone through this, where I thought I had a good idea of what was going to happen as a result.
Right.
And I've been wrong every single time.
Right.
Like, which is really kind of funny in the sense that today we've got 2 letters dealing with marriage, and I'm the guy in the room that's been married and divorced twice.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've got a little expertise in this area.
You got some cred.
Yeah, I got some street cred. But like, I remember the first divorce thinking like, that was really difficult for me because I felt like I know my family. I know how they're going to react. This is going to be a stain. This is going to, on their reputation. They're going to be very upset. This is going to be terrible. And it's going to make things weird, even like between my grandparents and aunts and uncles, and this whole thing is just going to be terrible. And I was absolutely wrong about that.
Right.
And my family loves me. And they're like, all right, we'll work through this. It's okay.
Yeah.
We're fine. They totally didn't react how I thought they were going to react.
Right.
And then after the second one, that was probably the lowest point in my life. And I thought, I remember, now I wish I could go back and talk to Nick at that time.
Right.
And the first thing I would do is I would just be like, just come here.
Yeah.
Come here. And then I'd smack me across the face. Because the stuff that I was thinking at the time was like,
so untrue.
My life is over.
Right.
This is terrible. It's never going to be as good as I had it. And this is, what's the point in this, and all that. And it's just, and then now I'm looking back at them like, no, like this, God, you could have.
It was so small.
Right. It sucked.
Yeah.
It sucked. It was terrible. But you work through it.
Yes.
And then the sun will come up again tomorrow.
Right.
And there's other good things happening, and you meet new people, and you have fun experiences, and life goes on.
Right.
And it's never as bad as your mind portrays it in the moment.
The delusion of depression and in heartbroken sadness moments like this is that you have no options, that the world is flat, and that you are stuck in a single point forever and ever. And that's not true.
Right.
And that's the difference, is when you live down the road a little bit, you come back to that person and you say, step outside, man. There are 360 options in every single moment of your day. Anything is possible. Quit your job. Move to Tahiti. Open up a surfboard shop. That's possible. That is technically an option. So, like, every possibility exists at the same time. Nothing limits you. You are not trapped. But damned if you don't feel like it. Like all these people, you already know what they're thinking. You already know what they're going to do. And they start fortune telling. We talk about cognitive distortions a lot. You start mind reading. You start catastrophizing. And whenever you believe the world is that way, yeah, man, of course you feel trapped and terrible. And then your body responds too, and that makes it even worse.
Right.
Now you start to release biochemicals that prepare you for death.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're not in, a lion's
It's
den.
it's not a logical part of the brain.
No.
That, and I remember thinking that to myself too, like looking back, like this was the one person in my life, that was the only person on the planet. Like, there's 8 billion people. You just happen to meet the right one?
Right, yeah, you nailed it.
Really?
Yeah, right.
First shot? You just,
But at the time...
at the time, that seemed
feels
logical.
That way. But feelings are not facts.
Exactly.
And this is part of the magic of therapy, is connecting with another human who can understand in an honest and authentic way what it is you're really going through, and yet also communicate truth from the outside of your prison cell and tell you, dude, the world is not what you think it is. So, writer, the most important thing to us is that you attend to yourself right now. We need to make safety the first plan. I know you're hurting. I am not minimizing that. In fact, I want to address it. And when that is being addressed, you are going to discover how many options still exist and how much of your life is still ahead. And that therapist is going to help unlock those perspectives. Anything is possible. Change is inevitable. You are not trapped. But you feel that way. But feelings are not facts.
And you're still better off than Nick.
Yeah. It's like light years.
Yeah.
Nick does a podcast with Jim.
And I'm still happy. Bottom. I'm still happy. I'm at rock bottom and I'm still happy.
Look at Nick's partner.
See, yeah.
Come on.
You're doing great.
Fine.
Yeah. I got to get Nick into a contract and so he never gets away from me. But yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. Well, anyway, writer, hey, lean in. You've got this. We're rooting for you. And please, feel free to keep us in the loop. You've done a really good job passing notes back and forth. And quick shout out to the entire community. We talk pretty openly about suicide and depression on this show. A lot of people have actually given us feedback and said, hey, you guys, I'm glad you do that. Like, a lot of people are scared of that topic or they don't know how to handle it. I like to think that as professionals, this is something we can do, and we're really comfortable with it. And so we are completely fine with talking about that topic with you. And this is also a great moment to remind you, we are not considered emergency services. Okay.
Correct.
And so if you feel in danger, you always call 911 or you call the suicide hotline,
which is 1-800-273-8255.
And you can also text that line too. It's okay to walk into a hospital and just tell them in the ER what you're going through. And you might think, well, what if I change? What if I don't feel this way in 24 hours? That's fine. Go ahead and take that first step. They're not going to keep you there in a straitjacket. They're going to let you cool down. Okay, it's like having a fever. And I'm glad that people reach out to us. You're always welcome to. But just please remember, we are not considered the first person that should hear this message. You should take your first step and then let us know how things are going.
The text line is 741-741.
Okay, 741-741. Very cool. So, but hang in there, Ryder, and we can't wait to hear about how things are going once you get connected with a therapist and start this journey, okay?
Yes.
Email us from the ER.
Yeah. Hey, guys,
There's always
it's
a
me.
waiting room.
Yeah,
Right.
take a selfie.
Yeah.
Send it to us.
Check in.
Yeah, check in. Review the ER on Yelp.
Yeah.
Check in first and then
Check in.
let us know.
Yeah,
Yes.
then, hey, guys, it's me. I'm in the psych ward. Things are going great. The Jell-O's fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's what got me here.
So, it's the first episode of the month.
It's the first of the month.
So we've got some Patreons we need to thank.
Wake up.
So I got our THERAPODs right here. So big thank you to Adam Rebesnick, Brad Kiefhofer, Chelsea Saracen, Corey Owens, Craig Little, Creamer Jean, Curtis Kiwi Fruit Hanlon, Don Dorr, Eric Lamb, Fred Bashara Jr., Gavin Bristow, Heather Psychotic Scoop, Crease, Ian Whitefall, James Cole, Jeffrey Ackerman, Jessica Vent, Jim Hunter, Joseph Pangrazio, Carrie Tierark, Kate Keller, Katie Chawalski. Oh, man.
Chawalski? That feels right.
Chalkowski.
Oh, okay.
Kenneth Liu, Kenneth Soto, Lori Elsroth, Linda Brandmeier, Lindsay Brashara, Manuela Muzaku, Matthew Neer, Malaya Okie Scoop, Richard Bruins, Robert Paulson, Scoopaholic, Scoopator Ascending, Scoopstronaut, Shayla Bullock, Stacy Westerland, Terrible Monkey Scoop. I think that's right. Hold on. I have to hover over it. So, yes.
It feels right.
It feels right. Tess Miller, 3 Scoops, a Lady, Todd Canfield, and Tracy Bat Scoop, Repolgo.
I think there already is a Bat Scoop.
Oh, yeah,
You're gonna
there
get my
is.
mom sued. I've met Bat Scoop.
Jim's Bat Mom.
Yeah, Bat Scoop's a cool dude. Jim's Bat Mom Replogle. We also want to thank our, was that the THERAPODs?
Just THERAPODs.
Oh, that's just THERAPODs. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, let's upgrade to the Pterodactyls.
Okay, hold on. I gotta pull that
Screeching
up
sounds.
Here.
Remember,
didn't
Pterodactyls, it's a very cool community to join. And even though we have in no way given them any kind of special benefit for doing this, they do it. They like mental health. What are you
Our
going to do?
Pterodactyls are Andrea Anderson, Brian Lehman, Crazy Manana Scoop, David Pollock, Ice Blue Scoop, Leon Kassab, Scott Brady, Tom Morrison, and Cindy Ash.
Yeah, if you're a pterodactyl, you get our cell phone numbers. Those guys just text us all the time, so that's their reward.
Yeah, if you're a THERAPRODUCER, you get a key to our houses. So consider that. Think about it.
Yeah, don't even let us know when you're coming over. Just throw your bag on the couch and, hey, man, you got anything in the fridge? Yeah,
Doors always open.
That's right. Hey, Smitty, what are you doing here? That's none of your damn business, Nick. Sorry. I'll show myself out.
Give me your car keys.
Give me your car keys. Okay, yeah, no problem. I'll just walk. That's fine. Well, we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the THERAPRODUCERs. Anybody who gives at the $20 or above level is a THERAPRODUCER. So we want to thank Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, who is the chairman of the board, Kayla Lansbury, David Data Scoop, Violon, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, and ex officio board members Ellie O'Dare and Dan Martin.
Ellie O'Dare got a new car. Did you see that?
Woo! Also a dashboard cam. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
It's like beautiful, like photography of sunsets and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Very sharp.
If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, who tried to fucking poison me. And thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by opening this episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting the link provided to somebody who needs it. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
If you want to submit a question to the show, ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I am Jim Malort.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.